are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Whistleblower Heroes, everyday heroes and educators sharing the information you need to know here on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Ella. What is a whistleblower? A whistleblower is a person who makes public disclosures of wrongdoing, corruption, and crime. These courageous people often suffer retaliatory actions because of their disclosures, but in the end, many of these people are often the catalyst for needed change and are eventually lauded as heroes. I am here to celebrate these heroes and give them a platform because shining a light on wrongdoing wherever it occurs plays an important role in keeping society peaceful, free, and just. So with me today, I have a very, very kind man. His name is Mr. Michael Bustler. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He is a professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey and a former fellow at the William J. Hughes Center for Public Policy. Previously, he held positions at Pennsylvania State University, Rutgers University, and the University of Delaware. He teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in finance and economics. Bustler has written opinion columns for more than 35 years in major newspapers and for online sites, Town Hall, Newsmax, and LifeSet. He is a free market economist and analysis public policy positions from that perspective. So I just want to say welcome, Michael. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you, Ella. It's my pleasure to be here.
So economics and public policy, I think we're going to have quite a bit to discuss.
Yeah, especially a lot happened really today in economics. As you probably know, President Trump's tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum went into effect. The Chinese retaliated, putting tariffs on a lot of food products produced in the U.S. and sold in China. So there's that. And the other thing was the unemployment number was announced. The economy did add another 200,000 plus jobs last month, but the unemployment rate inched up a little bit. So we can talk about all of that.
Oh, great. We'll do that. Before we get into that, I'm just curious how you became interested in economics, and I like to hear about people's background and what shaped them, and how you became interested in these subjects and topics.
Yeah, I actually started out in engineering in college. And got through with an engineering degree and decided that really wasn't for me. I went back and got a master's in finance and did have some economics courses during that time. And I spent a lot of time thinking about economics. And what really got me interested was back in the late 70s, Milton Friedman had just won the Nobel Prize in 1976. I was very young back then. I started corresponding with him, and to my surprise, he corresponded back. So for the next 4 years, he acted as kind of my mentor and shaped a lot of my free market economics views. And with that spark, I was able to keep going in economics, and I've been analyzing public policy, particularly with slant towards economics now for a number of years.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. You're an engineer, huh? My father was an engineer, so that's interesting. You went from engineer to the work that you're doing now. And so what was your first position? Did you immediately go into teaching?
No, I went into industry first, and I stayed there for a few years. I was doing fairly well. I had an MBA, and back then people were getting hired to go up the corporate ladder. So I stayed a few years in doing that, and I decided that really wasn't what I wanted to do. So I decided to leave that, go back and study economics, and I did, and then I started teaching, and I've been teaching now for about 30 years.
Wow. Okay. And then I also kind of went onto your Facebook. I really like it. It's called Funding Democracy, the Economics of Freedom. Yeah, sorry, a little tongue twisted here today. So that is, I really have enjoyed kind of perusing that and reading that as well. So I don't know where to start. Do you want to, since we were discussing China, how about we talk about China a little bit?
Yeah. So Trump put on some tariffs on some Chinese products, and basically, President Trump also really favors free trade. He looked at some of the agreements that we had and said, look, these free trade agreements, NAFTA with Canada and Mexico, an agreement we have with the European Union, for instance, both of those are not free, and they're not exactly fair. So Trump understands that free trade really benefits everybody. For instance, in the U.S., we're very good, have a good climate for growing wheat. So with a small amount of resources, we get a huge output of wheat. If we tried to grow coffee, we'd have to use a lot of resources. We don't have a climate, we wouldn't get very much coffee. Take a country like Colombia, they have a perfect climate for growing coffee. With a little bit of resources, they get a lot of coffee. They can't grow wheat, it's way too hot there. So what happens is, U.S. grows all the wheat, we get a lot of wheat. Colombia grows all the coffee, they get a lot of coffee. We trade, everybody makes out better. So the concept of free trade is supported by the vast majority of economists and President Trump. President Trump would like to get to truly free and fair trade where there were no tariffs on anything. However, when he looked at the agreements that we had, he recognized there was an imbalance. For instance, with the European Union, if a car is made in Germany or Italy or France and sold in the U.S., they pay a 2.5% tariff. If the U.S. makes a car and sells it in Europe, we pay a 10% tariff. So as a result of that, they don't buy as many of our cars, we buy a lot of theirs, and money flows out of the country to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars every year. So President Trump, unlike prior presidents, said, I'm not going to kick the can down the road. I'm not a politician, so I don't understand necessarily the politically correct way to handle these things. I'm a business person. And as a business person, when I see a problem, I'm going to confront it head on, look at my options, and try to solve the problem as quickly as possible. Trump realized, since these trade agreements are in the favor of everybody except the U.S., it's going to be very difficult to bring these countries to the table and say, hey, let's renegotiate this. So what does a business person do? A business person creates a sense of urgency. And how does he do that? He says, I'm putting big tariffs on critical products that China needs to sell to the U.S. to keep their economy going. Now they're going to retaliate, which they did, and put tariffs on food products. However Trump reasons, we're really in a much stronger position than they are. And why is that? Well, if we put a tariff on steel, so Chinese steel becomes expensive, we have the ability to make our own steel. And steel is what we call an intermediate good. Consumers don't buy steel. They buy cars which have some steel in them. So it shouldn't have too much of a negative impact on consumer prices. On the other hand, China puts tariffs on finished goods, food, that will all get passed on to the consumers, which will hurt their economy and hurt consumers' purchasing power. They don't have the ability to make their own food. Don't have the right climate for it, don't have near the corporate-type farms that we have. So Trump reasons that by putting on these tariffs, and I expect them to retaliate, and if they do, I'm going to hit harder. You know, President Trump says, when I get punched, I punch back harder. And the whole purpose of this is not to start a trade war, although that may start in the short term. The purpose of this is to bring everybody to the negotiating table, and let's negotiate something that's fair. We passed NAFTA in 1993, it went in effect in 94, between Canada and Mexico and U.S. Well, the U.S. was a very, very strong economy. We wanted to help Canada and Mexico, so I said, look, we'll have free trade, and we'll even stack some things in favor of Canada and Mexico. An example would be, it's like you're playing a baseball game. The U.S. gets 3 outs per inning. they say to Canada, well, look, I know we're trying to help you get started. We'll give you 4 outs per inning. So after a couple of years, you start noticing the U.S. is losing every one of the baseball games. So the U.S. says, we're not going to let you have 4 outs anymore. You're going to have 3 outs per inning. I thought during the G7, Prime Minister Trudeau agreed in principle to that. And then after the meeting, he went back to his constituents. The dairy farmer said, look, the U.S. is so efficient at producing dairy products, unless you put a 270% tariff, that's almost 3 times the price of the product, tariff on products, we're not going to be able to compete. So Trudeau then said, okay, I'm not so sure I'm going to go along with Trump and try to renegotiate to the point where we're eliminating these tariffs. So the whole point of what happened today, and we all hope it's short term, that everybody comes to the table, but the whole hope is President Trump does not want to kick the can down the road as President Bush did and President Obama did. He wants to solve this problem now, and he's going to do it by creating this sense of urgency, bringing everybody to the table. And the idea is, let's now negotiate something that's fair. We do have one other problem with China, in that when you're looking at a currency, the dollar versus the Canadian dollar or the English pound or the euro, the exchange rate floats based on economic conditions. The amount of dollars it takes to buy each one of those will fluctuate, and that's good. It keeps everything in a free market setup. China, on the other hand, sets their exchange rate, and they peg it artificially low, so U.S. goods are very expensive to them, and Chinese goods are very inexpensive to the U.S. Now, again, the result of that is they don't buy much from us, and we end up buying a lot from them. Hundreds of billions of dollars flow out of the country every year. So I would say don't be too worried about this trade war. I think it's going to be relatively short term, and even if there's a little short-term pain, Trump will resolve this and we'll have fair trade going into the future.
Very well put. Thank you. Do you think, sorry, I was on mute there. Do you think the public is going to start to kind of push a little bit on this matter? Because we do so much business with China.
Well, I'm not sure. So what we'll notice first is that I had a neighbor that just bought aluminum rain gutter for his house. The installer said, look, the price of aluminum has just gone up. It's going to be X number of dollars more than it was before. So you're going to see some of that happening. I don't think it's going to last very long because I hope everybody comes to the table and resolves this. But if it does last more than a few months, consumers are going to really start to push back, saying, why am I paying so much more now for all these goods? Trump's tariffs are hurting me. And as a result of that, I don't think it's such a good idea. So yes, there's likely to be pushback from consumers.
Yeah, I imagine so. And the companies here, as you mentioned, that are dependent upon some of the product that China sends over.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
So what's going to happen now, the products from China will be more expensive. And the reason they bought it from China in the first place was it's cheaper to buy steel from them than it is American producers. But once the tariff goes on and the price goes up, it will now be cheaper to buy steel from American producers than than Chinese producers. And as a result, the U.S. steel companies will start to gear up and produce more. Now, again, the downside is consumers are going to pay more for steel.
Yeah. And then what about what's going on with Canada? Because, I mean, it's not just China. We have other tariff issues or other tariffs that have been put into place. What's your opinion about Canada and some of these other countries?
Well, Canada is a very large trading partner to us, and for years has been a very strong ally, and we'd love for that to continue. But the thing is, any trade between us has got to be fair. They can't put a 270% tariff. That's if something costs $1, there's $2.70 in taxes they're putting on it, which raises the price up to $4, they can't keep doing that and hurting our dairy farmers. If our dairy farmers are very efficient at producing dairy products, which they are, they should be in free trade. They should be able to trade those freely without paying these big tariffs. So we'd like to continue, and it's in everybody's best interest to keep a very strong relationship with Canada. But any trade has now got to be on an even keel. Both teams have to get 3 outs per inning, no 4 outs per inning anymore. And that's what Prime Minister Trudeau has been complaining about. Essentially, you're taking away one of our outs per inning. We don't want you to do that. But it's got to be done on a level playing field from now on, and that's President Trump's point.
Mm-hmm. And I guess what he does try, I mean, he wrote a book called The Art of the Deal, as you're probably well aware of, and he tries to create leverage by cornering his quote-unquote opponent. And he's done this with foreign policy, immigration, budgeting, private companies, and et cetera, et cetera. And, a lot of times it doesn't really work out to I don't think that's applicable. His tactics are not applicable in every case, especially the way he's managing the government sometimes.
Well, he would argue that they are working. And in foreign policy, when he took that approach, for instance, since President Clinton, they've been trying to get North Korea to stop their nuclear program. President Clinton in 1994 gave them $6 billion, and they promised to stop their nuclear program. They never did it. So the can got kicked to President George Bush. He did a few things, kicked the can to President Obama. He sort of did a few things, kicked the can down the road further. President Trump, with the tactics that frankly make my stomach churn half the time when I read these things, but they end up being somewhat effective in the long term. I think with North Korea, although people said, look, he took us to the brink of war, and what kind of crazy guy is this? Since he did that, North Koreans, now they're not completely honest with us, so they're doing some things that they said they're not going to do anymore, but at least they're not firing missiles over Japan anymore. So while those tactics tend to not be politically correct, and remember, he's not a politician, he's a business person, they're not politically correct. He feels by keep going like this, we're going to get positive results in the longer term and problems will be solved for good, is his view.
Mm-hmm. And then what about some other policies? What else is on your mind that you'd like to discuss or share with the public?
Well, one thing that President Trump did when he was running and when he's in office, he said, look, the main problem the U.S. economy has is we haven't had strong economic growth. Historically, economic growth averages 3 to 3.5% per year. During President Obama's term, he didn't have 1 year where economic growth was at least 3%. That's the first president in history. We haven't had economic growth of 3% since 2005. We haven't had economic growth of 4% since the year 2000. President Trump is concentrating on economic growth as his top priority. President Obama had top priorities being, let's solve some of these social issues. There's social injustices, income inequality, people don't have health insurance, not enough people have access to food stamps, not enough people have access to welfare, we're polluting the environment. All of those social issues, which are very important, he made number one and not economic growth. And as a result, economic growth was very poor. And in my view, that's what's causing a lot of our economics and even some of our social problems. So President Trump got in, he said, I'm going to concentrate on growing this economy. There are many regulations that were put into place that, in his view, were counterproductive. So he immediately took those off. Since he did that, the economy has been averaging almost a 3% growth. Then he got the tax cut passed. The current quarter we're in, the second quarter of this year, the first estimate of GDP growth will be out in about 3 weeks, the end of July. You're going to see economic growth of 4% or more, and that will continue the next quarter. Now, what that does, when you get growth like that, it solves a number of problems. For the last 10 years, my students graduate, and they're lucky if they can find one good job opportunity. As a result, many of them took jobs for which they were overqualified. So they're now what we call underemployed. Because they took those jobs that you don't need a college degree for, people that didn't have college degrees, didn't have any opportunity at all, they ended up dropping out of the workforce. They became what we call discouraged workers. Once the economy starts growing at this 4% rate and does it for a while, a year or two, all the underemployed people will now find better opportunities, so they'll have better jobs at higher income. That's going to open up the jobs that don't necessarily require a college degree, so that the discouraged workers will come back into the workforce. And as a result, incomes for all workers will go up. You take a look at today's unemployment picture. They said the economy added 213,000 more jobs in the month of June, and they revised May and April up by about 35 or 38,000. Even with that many more jobs, the unemployment rate went up from 3.8 up to 4.1%. Well, how could that be? And the reason that happened was there were about 500,000 of these discouraged workers, people who dropped out of the workforce, couldn't find jobs, and they were looking for so long, not being able to find them, they stopped looking. So they're what we call discouraged workers. But about 500,000 of those people entered the workforce last month. So although we created over 200,000 new jobs, we brought 500,000 in, and that's why the unemployment rate temporarily went up a little bit. But that's a good thing in that it shows that these discouraged workers are coming back into the workforce. So the emphasis, at least for the next couple of years, should be economic growth, get everybody working, get everybody's income up, get tax revenue coming up. Once you have that, you're in a much stronger position to solve these social problems, which are very important. But in terms of priority at this time, economic growth, Trump feels, should be placed at a higher priority than solving social problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I see your point from your standpoint. And then, I saw in here, I was looking through your Facebook, and one of the top posts you have is that we need a pro-growth, equitable tax code. Do you want to go into that a little bit? I know you posted it. It's not your article, but obviously maybe you agree with that.
Yeah. So the next thing is Trump lowered taxes. The economy is going to grow. He talked last week about permanently reforming the tax code and coming up with something that's fair. My suggestion for that, the plan that I've been pushing, is a 15% single rate tax on all income above a livable minimum. I will define a livable minimum as twice the poverty level, with no deductions for anything. So if if a family of four, for instance, let's say they have income of $70,000 a year, the livable minimum, twice the poverty rate for a family of four, would be $50,000. So they had income of 70, livable minimum is 50, you subtract that, they're left with $20,000 in taxable income. They pay a 15% rate, and that's exactly what's due. You don't need any complicated forms to fill out. You don't need the tax preparers to do this for you. In my opinion, and I've been pushing this for about 15 years, in my opinion, that's the only tax plan that's fair. So everybody pays above the livable minimum. Everybody pays 15% rate on every dollar that they make above the livable minimum, no deductions for anything. And all income is taxed the same, whether you make it from wages or capital gain or dividends or interest or however you make it, it's all taxed the same. We have a problem today in that capital is taxed at a lower rate than labor. So labor's wage rate, tax rate can go up to 37%. Capital gains tax is only 20%. I don't know why that is, but my system would eliminate that. Everything would be taxed exactly the same. No deductions for anything. So the government wouldn't, the tax code rather, wouldn't favor somebody who owns a home over somebody who decides to rent a home. Right now, the homeowner gets tax deductions. The renter doesn't get anything. I don't think that's fair. So that's what I've been pushing. And if somebody wants to read in detail, as you say, they can go to my page on Facebook, Funding Democracy, The Economics of Freedom. It's a little more detail there. But that's essentially what I think is the fairest.
That would affect home sales, though, because then there's not really that incentive to purchase a home.
Well, then people would be free to choose whether they want to purchase a home or rent a home. Why should the federal government influence your decision whether you should purchase a home or rent a home? Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what the answer to that question is.
Well, the bankers, someone's making money off those mortgage rates.
Yeah, but sociologists have long said that many of the social problems we have, crime, drug use, high teenage pregnancy, high dropout rates for people going to high school, many of those problems are minimized in areas where people own homes rather than areas where people rent homes. So the government would like to encourage you to own a home for that reason. Of course, the answer back is I don't know if the government really should favor one over another. We really should let people be free to choose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They do, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And my plan will be very difficult to implement because there's all kinds of special interests and all kinds of reasons why people believe somebody else needs a tax break. But I think that's the fairest plan. Now, I get a little pushback, too, saying, well, suppose somebody makes $10 million a year. You're only going to tax him at a 15% rate? And my answer is yes. I would tax everybody at a 15% rate. And the reason is we all believe that as you make more money, you should pay more taxes. We all believe that. But what we have now, when you make more money, your tax rate, not just your dollars, your tax rate goes up. And as a result, that tends to, especially at the higher levels, tends to discourage people from producing more. So I would argue keep that 15% rate for everybody. And as somebody's income goes up, their taxes will go up proportionately. I mean, if you make $1 million, 15% of that is $150,000. If you make $10 million, 15% of that is $1.5 million. So your tax liability would rise proportionately as your income goes up. The way it is now, your tax liability increases disproportionately as your income goes up. Mm-hmm. So that's my plan.
Sounds like a plan, but plans are hard to lay. That's for sure. They are hard
to
implement.
Sure are. Sure are.
Okay. What about colleges? You're a college professor, and these college tuitions have skyrocketed just since I was a child. I mean, I know the statistics of people who graduate, and like you even said, you can go to college and still not be guaranteed a job. It's we're in a conundrum.
And the cost has gone up tremendously. Mm-hmm. So the answer, the question is, why has that happened, and what can we do about it?
Yes.
Well, it's happened for a couple of reasons. One, colleges do a lot more for the students than they used to do. Rather than just teaching them, there's all kinds of student services that they have. Colleges have become more aggressive in marketing to get students to come in. So that costs money. Students want big student centers on campus. They want nice dormitories to live in, and they expect colleges to provide those services. So that's one reason. Mm-hmm. The second thing, and it may hurt me to say this a little bit, but professor salaries have increased faster than the inflation rate. Now, the professors will argue That's bringing better quality people in as college professors. But on the other hand, a college is labor intensive. So when the cost of labor goes up, the students are going to feel it. And the third thing is, when you pay for college, a large majority of students receive financial aid. So you're not really concerned what the college costs. Whatever it costs, you can borrow enough to pay for it. So if they raise the tuition a little bit and they raise the amount you can borrow, well, you figure it doesn't affect me now. Now, of course, you have to pay the piper at the end. But the idea of allowing students to be able to obtain all the financing they needed to go to college was certainly a good idea, because we don't want somebody not to go because they can't afford it. So it's certainly a good idea to provide financial aid. But on the other hand, we make financial aid so easy to get that when colleges raise tuition, students, they don't see it coming out of their pocket now. They just say, well, my loan amount went up a little bit, so they don't squawk too much, and the college expenses keep going up. I think they're at a point where it's dangerously high. And I just saw a study that said, I forget, between now and 1936 or something, they expect tuition to double. So it's a problem that we need to work on. And we don't want to saddle students with huge amounts of debt, because you end up graduating and, it takes you 10 years to pay this back. In the meantime, you have to struggle. If the economy was growing the way it should, and the college graduates could get out and have a good job waiting for them, the debt wouldn't be much of a problem. When I graduated a few years ago from college, I had 2 or 3 possible opportunities. And that's the way it should be. The economy should be growing and being robust enough that college graduates don't have to settle for whatever I can get, which has pretty much happened to a large number of college students the last 10, 12, 13 years. Rather, they've got opportunities and they're able to select which opportunity is really best for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that is really something that's concerning to us as parents.
Yes, absolutely.
With college-age children, as well as a 14-year-old, it is, you have to save so much of your income for college. So it's very
tough. I just put 3 kids through college. And although I'm in finance, so I tell people not to do this, but I ended up pulling a big chunk out of my retirement account because my kids wanted to go to, private colleges that were a little pricey. And the only way we can get through it was I had to pull money out of my retirement account. So yes, it's a worry. Parents want their students, their children, to pursue whatever they think they have an interest in and have the ability to pursue. And you don't want to have money be the issue that you can't follow your dreams. So it is certainly a concern, and I'm very sympathetic, and it's something that we have to do something about.
Mm-hmm. My producer was messaging me, and she was saying that she believes the corporations that need higher taxes. Any input on that?
Yeah, I think exactly the opposite. I think the corporations need lower taxes. And why is that? If you raise the taxes from a finance standpoint, a company looks at, should I make an investment? Well, you look at what the investment costs and how much cash flow you'll have every year. If taxes are high, the cash flow that you get is lower, the investment doesn't make sense. If taxes are lower, the cash flow to the company is higher. Now it's profitable. Now they invest. That's exactly what's going to happen this year. He lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% average to 21. Now, again, I'm pushing 15%, but he lowered it down to 21. That's going to give corporations more profit, and more profit will lead to creating more capital, whether they invest it themselves, whether they give it to stockholders, whether they buy back some shares so other stockholders have it. Whoever ends up with the capital, they're going to reinvest it back into the economy. We have a capital-intensive economy, which means when we're manufacturing, There's not a whole lot of people on the assembly line anymore. There's robots on the assembly line, and the workers are controlling robots. So we have a capital-intensive economy, which means to grow, we're going to need a lot of capital. Capital is created a couple of ways, but one way is when corporations earn profit, pay a dividend to their stockholders who expect a return for making an investment, and then keep what's ever left over to reinvest back into the economy. And if we're going to get the kind of growth that we really need at this point, corporations have to be able to make investments back into the economy. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people have said to me, well, it's not fair. Somebody's getting more than I am. You know, Trump cut taxes. The average person only got $1,000, $2,000, and the people that make a lot of money got $10,000 or $20,000. So that's not fair. Well, the answer to that is, if you're going to cut taxes, you have to cut them for people that pay taxes. Almost half of income earners, 47%, almost half, don't pay any federal income tax at all. The top 20% of income earners pay 84% of the federal income tax. So if you're going to cut taxes, obviously the people that pay the most are going to get the most tax cut. Where it's really going to help the middle class is once the economy starts growing and we get that 4 or 5% growth and there's more opportunity for middle class, that's where they're going to start to see the benefits of what this tax cut will do. It's exactly what Reagan did in 84 and exactly what Kennedy and Johnson did in 64. They lowered the tax rates for everybody, including the highest income earners, and it ended up having the economy grow tremendously. 4 years after the Kennedy-Johnson tax cut, for the next 4 years, the economy averaged a 6.5% growth. When Reagan did it in 1982, in 1984, the economy grew at a 7.5% rate. If we get that kind of growth, you'll have true prosperity. And I believe Americans have forgotten what prosperity feels like. Mm-hmm. Since it's been so long since we had at least 4% growth, Americans forgot what it feels like to be prosperous economically. That's all going to come back as a result of the tax cut. Happened after Kennedy-Johnson, happened after Reagan, and I believe it's going to happen after what Trump's tax cut was. It's important to cut the taxes for high-income earners. Not that we want to give money to the rich, but the high-income earners, with their tax cut, that will create new capital. They're not going to go out and buy any more cars and houses. They already have all that. What they're going to do with the tax cut is reinvest it back into the economy, and that's going to help grow the economy.
But so much of the money isn't going back to the rich or the poor. I mean, what about the military-industrial complex? There's trillions of dollars going in there.
It is, and the view, similar to what Reagan did back in 1981, the view is that the American military is really in terrible shape. The goal was always to have the military in a position to be able to fight at least 2 wars at the same time. You hope you never have to get there. In fact, Reagan's view was, let's build the military up strongly so we can easily do that. Now we're so powerful that people are not going to try to attack us because they know how powerful we are. Reagan coined the term peace through strength. So become very strong, then you can start demanding things happen, like break up the Soviet Union, tear down the Berlin Wall. Once our military is built up so strong and people realize nobody will try to attack the U.S. So yes, it's very costly, but it ends up bringing on more national security and less fear of another country coming to attack you. And that's the view President Trump has taken. Again, we can debate all this, but that's the view that he's taken.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. Let's see, the banks, the banking system, the interest rates.
Okay.
There's comments about, we'll go ahead, we'll touch there first and then see what else we have.
Okay. So when the economy went into recession, one way to get out of the recession is vastly increase the money supply and bring interest rates way down. The recession was so severe that interest rates in some instances dropped pretty close to zero. Now, that's not sustainable. Historically, for instance, the 10-year Treasury bond had a 3% rate. It was down under 2%, in fact, even lower than that for some time. The Federal Reserve just wants to bring things back to a more normal situation. And what they're a little bit afraid of, if you get a lot of growth and you start to heat up a little too fast, now you start worrying about inflation being a problem. So they're going to try to walk a fine line between allowing the economy to expand, not contract the money supply and raise interest rates too much, but keep the interest rates high enough so that you avoid inflation. Look at housing prices. Because of poor economic growth, we haven't been building a whole lot of houses in the last 10 years. Well, now that incomes are going up, more people can afford houses. So you have an increase in the demand for houses, more people able to buy them, and we don't have many houses. That starts to drive prices up. So one way to stop that from happening is to raise interest rates. So some people say, well, now I won't be able to buy a house. And that'll take some of the demand out until the supply can catch up and we don't have to worry about an inflation problem. So the Federal Reserve is likely to raise interest rates 2 more times this year. They raised them 3 times last year and twice already this year. So I think 4 times this year. It's only 1/4 of a point each time. It'll take another year after that to get interest rates back to a position where they're historically normal. The housing market, usually, if the mortgage rates are under 6%, the housing market historically is good. So right now, they're in most areas are in the 4.5% to 5% range. So they can still move up a little bit before it causes a lot of problems. And on the other side, the rates are now high enough, it pays people to start saving some money. The rates were so low, people didn't want to save. You put your money in a savings account. I think my bank pays me like 0.1% interest. It's pretty close to zero. So that kind of thing is going to change too, and people will be more encouraged to save money, which is also creates capital, and that's going to be good too.
Mm. I was just thinking about loans, like with mortgages, kind of jumping a little bit off topic. They remember stated income.
Yeah,
I remember they did away with those, but those were.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
Because the federal government was convinced by sociologists that many of the social problems are minimized when people own homes rather than rent, the federal government in the early 1990s, and this was not a Democrat or Republican, both parties went along with this, they said, look, let's try to increase the home ownership rate, which historically is about 62, 63, 64% of households, the other 30-some% rent. Let's try to increase that to 70%. And if we do, more people will be owning homes, and sociologists tell us that that'll minimize social problems. Well, the question was, how do you get that extra 8% people to turn from a renter to a buyer? Well, why weren't they buyers? Well, they weren't buyers because they didn't have a down payment and they can't afford the monthly payments. So the government said that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who purchases most of the mortgages from banks who just really originate them, said we would purchase mortgages where people could put nothing down. You don't have to verify your income. Just put down what it is and we'll believe you rather than verifying. That's your point about stated income. And we'll give them an exceptionally low interest rate the first year or two, and then it'll adjust upward. As a matter of fact, the policy worked in terms of by 2006, the home ownership rate had hit 69.9%, virtually 70%, which was the federal government's goal. The problem was then all the adjustable rate mortgages adjusted upward. The economy slowed down, so people were losing their jobs. Their mortgage payments were going up, they didn't have any money into the house anyway. They bought it with a zero down payment. So people said, look, I'm just going to walk away from the house and the heck with the mortgage. You had 11 million people, 8% of the households, 11 million people defaulting on an average of a $200,000 mortgage. That's $2.2 trillion. In my view, and there's a lot of debate here, but in my view, that's really what triggered the entire financial crisis that we had in '07 and '08. So yes, the federal government says now they told Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are what we call quasi-government agencies, that you're not purchasing mortgages anymore unless we can verify the income, and forget about these no down payment mortgages, and we're not doing any more of these drastically changing variable rate mortgages. So yes, things are changing today, and they're different than they were prior to the financial crisis.
What about Trump's the rest of his policies? Are you on board with most of the policies he has that he's putting in place right now?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
I tend to favor just about everything he's doing, even though, to be perfectly candid, when he first does some of these things, it turns my stomach. When I thought he's putting it, I'm a free market economist. When I thought he's putting tariffs on something, I said, this is terrible. This is wrong. But then I reasoned what he was doing, and it made sense. Most of his policies are like that, even though they kind of look bad. The people that elected him, the majority of the Electoral College elected him, and that's how we elect a president. The majority, and polls today verify this, the majority of the people do want secure borders. So President Trump is trying to secure the border, and again, he wants to do it now. He doesn't want this to drag on 3 or 4 years. He wants to resolve the problem. So sometimes he takes some of these seemingly drastic actions, like separating children from their mother, even though the prior 2 administrations did that too. But he does things like that, and now it brings it to a head. And he's since relented on that, but brings it to a head, and he's hoping now that'll put enough pressure on Congress to finally fix the immigration problem. When President Obama was running, he said to the Hispanic community, one of my priorities will be to deal with the immigration problem. And it was such a tough thing. I thought we almost had it there, that Gang of 8 thing they tried to pass. I thought we almost had it, but he was not successful. As popular as he was personally, and as good as he was at talking to people, he wasn't able to get any kind of an immigration policy through. So President Trump says we can't keep kicking these problems down the road. So I want to do something that'll create a sense of urgency, and that the Republicans and the Democrats will start talking to each other instead of fighting each other constantly, and come up with something that will satisfy the needs of everybody, at least somewhat in a compromise, that will satisfy enough of the needs so we can get an immigration policy passed that the majority of the people can live with. So I don't always approve of his tactics. And when they first come out, I get extremely nervous. And as I said, some of them make my stomach churn. But he's got to get these problems solved instead of kicking the can down the road for the next person to worry about. So I'm pretty much in agreement with everything that he's done so far, even though initially I sometimes balk at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's good to hear. So you have some faith.
Yeah,
I am seeing some changes. I go back and forth. I have like a love-hate thing with him right now. So it's tough. It is tough. And then just some of his, you look at him differently from an economic standpoint, but, women and just other people may look at him from a character standpoint.
Yeah,
but we'll just have to see how, we have to see how it all ends up in the wash. And I've said many times on the show that I appreciate that he's not part of the establishment. And so I do appreciate that in him, because we need to shake up that establishment a little bit. It's just too.
We certainly do on both sides of the aisle. Both sides of the aisle, we need things shaken up, and to get people in there who are not so much concerned with what to do politically, but more concerned with what to do that will benefit the American people. And look, we're very grateful to some of the people that have been there for 20, 25, 30 years or longer, certainly grateful to them. But it's, time to move over and let some of the younger people come in with some of the fresher ideas, and maybe some of the problems will get solved. They won't have some of these long-term grudges that some of these politicians seem to be holding.
Mm-hmm. And then I have a question in here about sales tax. What's your opinion on sales tax?
I think you're referring to the internet sales tax.
Yes.
Yeah?
Well, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So sales taxes are levied by the state as a way to produce revenue. Generally, I don't favor sales taxes because they're regressive taxes. What does that mean? In other words, lower income people, middle and lower income people, will feel the sales tax burden more than the wealthy people. And why is that? Because a lower income or middle income person ends up spending most of his after-tax income. And if you're putting a tax on how much you spend, all of their spending is going to get taxed. With a wealthy person, after taxes, somebody makes $1 million a year, they might after taxes, they might only spend $200,000 or $300,000 of it and invest the rest. So you're only going to tax the amount that they spend. So as a percent of their income, turns out to be relatively low. So generally, sales taxes are regressive, and I think there's a better way to do it than sales tax. However, given that states are going to have sales taxes, if you want to level the playing field, so the bricks and mortar stores, which are already at a disadvantage to the online retailers, but if you're going to give them any kind of chance at all, if they're paying, and I live in New Jersey, we're just about to raise the sales tax to 7%. If you're going to tax the bricks and mortar stores 7%, you've got to tax the online people 7% too, to again level the playing field. Look, I know there are a lot of products I buy, dog food, for instance. I used to go to the big pet store to buy dog food. Now I go online to buy it. It's more convenient. It's actually a little cheaper, and I don't have to pay sales tax. So it makes it a lot cheaper. So I don't necessarily like sales taxes, but if you're going to have them to level the playing field, you have to put it on internet retailers as well as bricks and mortar retailers, would be my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I live in Oregon. We don't have sales tax, but we feel it in other ways. Our property tax is very high. So if it's not going to be in one area, it's in one way, they're going to get you in another way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I live in New Jersey. We have high sales tax, high property tax, and high personal income tax, and a high estate tax once you pass away. So New Jersey is an extremely high tax state.
Yeah, estate tax has always been, I have family, I know some people who have some money, and they're like, we've already paid taxes on the money. Why should we have to pay taxes again? Why? It doesn't even make sense. And they said it like that, and I'm like, wow, you're right.
Yeah, and sometimes it gets to the point, if you have somebody who owns a farm, a substantial farm, it has good value. If they pass away and leave it to their heirs, the heirs now have to pay a estate tax on that. There's no liquidity for that. It's just a farm. So they end up having to borrow money against the farm in order to be able to pay taxes on money that their parents already paid taxes on. Now, again, President Trump and the tax bill passed in November helped that along a little bit by allowing more to be passed down tax-free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we just have a few more minutes, so anything you want to spend a couple minutes talking about before we head out?
Let me just say that I happen to be, as you may tell, a fairly strong supporter of President Trump for a number of reasons. Even if it looks like some of the things he's doing is not the right thing, and even if it looks like he has some severe personality flaws, try to look a little bit past. I'm trying to be tactful here. Try to look past that a little bit towards the goal of what the policy is. And I think you'll find a little less disagreement if you take a look at it that way.
Okay. Very good point. Okay, so we just have 2 more minutes. So what are you planning on doing in the future? Any plans or projects?
Well, I have a book I'm starting to work on about economics. You know, part of the problem with economics is that many of the American people, maybe a majority, don't quite understand what everybody's doing with all this economic jargon that they're throwing around. Mm-hmm. So I'm working now on a book that will explain some of these economic happenings in a dialogue so that the average person can understand it too. And I think the more that the general public can understand how economics works, particularly in a free society, then I think that will make things a little bit easier, and I think it will make policy more effective. And as you mentioned in the beginning, if you go to Facebook and search the Funding Democracy, the Economics of Freedom, you'll be able to see how I can put some of these complex situations into more easy to understand dialogue. And that's a book I'm going to work on. I've already started. It'll probably be a year or so until it comes out.
Wonderful. Any plans for the summer? Anything you're going to be doing the rest of the summer?
Well, I live at the Jersey Shore.
There you go.
Yeah, the term was over. I did teach a course in the summer term. That got over the end of June, and July and August, which at the New Jersey Shore, I don't think there's too many places. I'm a little biased, obviously. Too many places in the world that are quite as nice as the New Jersey Shore in July and August. So I'm going to spend as much time there as possible. My oldest son just had my first grandchild, who's now 11 months old, so I'll be able to spend a little time with him too.
Okay, that's great. And where can people find you online, and your Facebook address again, and maybe some of your
that was it. So go to
links
Facebook
to your favorite articles, or where they can find some of your work.
Absolutely. My last 300 probably columns are there. So on Facebook, search Funding Democracy. They'll come up Funding Democracy, the Economics of Freedom. Click on the page, and there's links there to my last probably 300 columns.
We're in promos now, so we just got a few more seconds.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free, but there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Ella, go ahead.
Okay, well, welcome back. I couldn't hear the promos. I'm going to work on that. Anyway, so we're here on Revolution Radio, and I'm here with my second hour guest. We're going to be shifting gears. We're going from economics and politics to now metaphysics. So we're going from the money world to the spiritual world. So my guest today is a host of ours here on Revolution Radio, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. How are you, Bridgette?
Hey, Ella, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to have you here, and it's a nice shift, to go from the world that we were just discussing to the world that we're going to be discussing, and so it's a pleasure to have you here. Can you maybe share with everybody a little bit about yourself so they know who you are in case they didn't catch the last show you were on?
Yeah, well, I'll just keep it brief. I'm a star kid, and I grew up in a family of medicine people on both sides of my family history. My real dad comes from the Russian, we can call him Mongolian lineages. It's been even traced back that his family line came through there, especially on his mother's side. And so I picked up a lot of my genetic work from him. And then on my mom's side, I was born into herbalists and shamans and exorcists and prophets. So I come from kind of two genetics on top of the star kid. So I've always been kind of like a doody. Very strange child doing strange things.
So when you say star kid, you don't mean like you were a child star or the kid of a star. You're saying you're like a star child. And some people may be unfamiliar with that term. So maybe you can take this moment to give them a definition.
Well, yeah. Okay. So all I can do is explain from my understanding. I haven't, I have known about a lot of other people who had been star kids. I came in the second grand wave. I know Dolores Cannon talked a lot about that. There was a huge wave that came before me. A lot of them didn't survive. I think my mom was in that group, and she was basically, tortured in mental hospitals for no reason. Her first husband was a handler, and he handled her and took her all the way back. Yeah. But
bad.
So she went through I think there was the first wave. A lot of them didn't survive. A lot of them were murdered. I mean, obviously, if you have gifts that other people in this world don't have, it becomes like a really big problem. And we all, star kids, we all stand out like sore thumbs. And there's really nothing we can do about that. In order to survive, we usually spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to be normal, how to function in this world like other people. And, the thing is, like, I see a lot of photos of star kids. There's a lot more coming onto the planet now than ever. So those are beings that have been placed here from, extraterrestrial families. And I don't believe that there's one type of extraterrestrial family. I think that you're picked. In my case, I was handpicked by, let's just say, like a council or a group to come here. So, maybe like 200, beings of different varieties that helped make the choice for me to come here. So periodically I have relationships with them. There are a lot of people on this planet that call themselves star seeds and stuff like that. And I don't believe that because it's just not my experience. And, people in the past who've said that they're star kids, I've tried to open communication with them. Not so much. I think that, the second wave, first wave people, I'm going to be 50 this year, are few and far between. And like I said, a lot of us have been murdered. We've been captured. We've been used psychically for warfare against other people and countries. We have been, experimented on. All kinds of us have come here. Not a lot of us have been able to do the work. And I remember, I remember living on different planets. I remember different things. And how my star family communicates with me is that they don't come here directly into this world, but what they do is they download information into things, and then they copy paste these things into my world, and then they'll let me dream about it. And then when I see it out in the desert, like one time I had this dream about this brick that had two spray painted, with red, white, and blue flags on it, right? And I thought, that's the weirdest thing ever. And then like 4 months later, I was walking out in the middle of the desert, and there it was. I was like, I probably should pick this up and take it with me. So, and then sometimes I do have, kind of a direct contact where I leave my body, there's a trigger, and that I go and I communicate with them. And I have to say, I don't communicate with them in the way that an abduction person would. I think that people who are being abducted are being lied to. It's a controlled thing, and they need people who are abducted. And I've been abducted as well.
I don't know anything about, I hear people talk about aliens, and I don't know anything about it, so it's all new to me as well. I've heard you speak about it, so it's very interesting. I have open ears.
Well, the other thing too is like sometimes the aliens or the ETs, or sometimes I think that they're government officials, or they could be extraterrestrial drones or robots that are running spacecraft, or coming into your house. I mean, if we look at a lot of the things, some of the things that the Mind Ultra, MK Ultra talk about, they talk about, waking up and seeing somebody come through like an energetic doorway, military people in the middle of the night. Like a doorway will appear in their room, and then, they are pulled through it, and, they're put onto missions or whatever else, right? So all these things are like completely possible, but the thing is where they get us, where the mind control, I think, really starts to play out is when they get us into situations where they are dictating the story. So a lot of the extraterrestrial people, or people that have been abducted, usually have this kind of similar stories where they are being abducted, and then over their life, like their sperm and eggs and some of their biological tissues are taken out. And, they ask more and more questions as they go along. Sometimes they're introduced to all their offspring, that a lot of these extraterrestrials are holding, because they're usually half extraterrestrial of some kind of race and then half human. Sometimes, I love that guy's story, and it's so sad that the government accused him of being a pedophile, and all of it was like completely set up. But he had a documentary. What was his documentary? I'll have to think about that. The Roman, I forget what his last name's story, but he did a whole documentary, and he showed all the proof of all the contacts, and they showed him his kids. Some looked sort of human, some didn't look human. His children started to visit him after he met them. And then all hell broke loose on Earth, and they sought to fully destroy him as a having pornography on his computer. It was like, it's pretty epic, but it's an amazing documentary. But one of the things that they do is they get us to side with the story. Humans really like this story thing, and we get attached to these stories. And so they can really morph us into helping them, right? By telling us a story like, the Greys like to tell a story that they've come from the future, and that they're us, they were once human like us, and they destroyed the planet. And so now they have to come back in time to get biological material to create new races to populate the Earth in the future. You know what I mean? Or And there's been a lot of interesting stuff. A lot of these human hybrids, I forget the book that the lady wrote. And there was a story about it's really interesting because I think somebody knew I was going to be talking about some of this stuff because my Skype got the weirdest group call. So I had to like ask Mona if it was her from the weirdest number. And it was a number. Something I've never seen on Skype that tried to ring me before. So I figured they thought maybe I would answer it. And then who knows, give me a little electroshock therapy. Anyway, glad, anyway, it's just interesting. Okay. So there's a woman that had a story and she wrote a book and I think the book just got released I think her book got released in like 2016 and she talked about, how her daughter was partially blind. Her daughter had a lot of genetic kind of chromosomal health issues, but her daughter went to college into another state. And her daughter ended up getting a roommate. They had like a little house or duplex. And so her daughter needed a roommate in order to be able to afford to go to college there because she was there on disability. And so she ends up getting this female roommate. But the girl, even though she's partially blind and stuff like that, thinks her roommate's really, really nice, but her roommate's really strange. Like there's people that come to the door and deliver her meals, In some cases, these meals are in jars in the refrigerator. And so the girl thinks, this is pretty bizarre. Like you don't eat food. You don't want to have dinner with me or anything like that. Well, the mother comes for Christmas to visit. And there's an incident where the girl the ET extraterrestrial hybrid that's going to college in this town, I think it's like Ohio or Illinois or something. The mother went on later on to write a book about it. Anyway, so the mother just is like noticing that this girl is like super strange. She's always wearing sunglasses. She's really pretty pale. She's really cute, kind, the whole 9 yards, and disappears a lot. And here, these weird jars of food are showing up and they're mostly green in the jars, some kind of, blend of something or other. And this is all that this girl eats. So one point, the girl almost falls down the stairs and during it, the mother actually catches her and the sunglasses come down and the mother said the eyes are just huge and they're green. And she said another really strange thing about the girl was that the girl had no bones. She had, looked like a human, but there were no bones in the physical body. And so she gasped. So then what happened was that the girl, the hybrid, had to call her handlers and say, look, the experiment's over. And so like one of the top Pentagon officials that was the handler of these hybrids trying to integrate them in society. This was in the 70s. So this kind of stuff has been going on for a super long time. So anyway, the Pentagon high-ranking general official comes to the house and basically tells her, the mom, the story about her and that they basically, killed her because the experiment, didn't really work. And so they had to get rid of her. And so later on, the woman, went on to write a book about it. And then I think the book was released in 2016 about it. So, and I think that I'm just a little bit more extraterrestrially and it interests me because, of my experience, having visitations. And so I have what I could call abductions. I've had physical battles with grays.
Can you go I want to hear about that? You were awake or how was that?
Well, I've had in my life a lot of different extraterrestrials that have come to visit me to help me. Other handlers, if you will. Some have come for short periods of time. I went through a lot of really head traumas in my life. There's a certain kind of extraterrestrial that comes to help with that. I've had some extraterrestrials that took me at a very young age and would take me to other planets that look like Mars and stuff like that and talk to me about things. The grays, though, are, a lot of them are robotronic, I guess. They're androidy, where there are a few of them that are the ones that are biological, that run the ships and stuff like that. Because you have to have like biological information and data in order to be able to work ships and stuff like that. But you could have a whole bunch of other helpers, that are like non-biological. And mostly there's two types of grays. I mean, one is the one that has the kind of the skinnier head, the big head at the top, skinny chin, and those huge like black eyes. Those are actually suits that they're wearing. What they look like underneath is like a wrinkled old prune is kind of like,
wow,
kind of a thing underneath. But in order for them, if they're biological, in order for them to operate here, they have to wear biosuits so that they don't die from the environment. And those big, black eyes are like lenses and stuff like that, so they can see in the dark or whatever else they need to do. So then there's the big head, which I call the big round head, and they kind of have little human faces, and they have these huge bobble heads. And sometimes those guys get linked in with the grays, and I've had experience with them too. And I really think that they're kind of, those ones are a little bit elitist, you know what I mean? Like, shut up, you human, kind of a thing. So I've also seen, I'll tell you, remind me to talk to you about the bird humanoid, which really kind of shook me. So this is the other thing too, is a lot of these mainstream extraterrestrials that people talk about, I've never seen them, like a lot of them I've never seen and I've never dealt with. So I always wonder if these things are not implanted into people's heads and they're actually reptilians without biosuits, without their bodies. You know what I mean?
Right.
Showing people stuff like, so I'm very, let's just say, disbelieving of the avians supposedly. And, I have seen one of the main people that helps me in my family, ETs, is Palladian, I'm pretty sure, type of Palladian. But there's a lot of things that I don't believe, and I think a lot of it has been twisted in a way. I really believe like this whole new age thing and this ascension thing is actually just the beings and the government and churches on earth creating another Jesus Christ kind of experience that people want to latch on and believe. Because basically in a lot of, let's just say, indigenous cultures, they talk about harvesting. We know that a lot of the reptoids that are on the planet, that they eat humans and that they steal us, and they do a lot of, really horrible things to us. So there has to be kind of like sort of a cover up, but there's no way that any higher evolved race would take us from their planet and take us somewhere else because we are the stupidest, unbelievable, non-thinking group. I mean, look at what we've done. We've destroyed a whole planet single-handedly.
Mm-hmm.
So
that I understand.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very sad what man has done to man and what we've done to this beautiful planet, and just the darkness that exists in man, that by at this point in time you think we would evolved high enough to communicate in a loving, compassionate manner, but I don't see that very often. I mean, maybe it's just because of the kind of circles I'm in, working in deep state and politics and target individuals. And it's a dark place with all this information. And I know there's beautiful people in the community, but it's really sad, honestly, knowing what I know.
Yeah.
And watching the news. Even a normal person watching the news knows there's dark, bad, evil, that there's evil in a human being, in their mind. It's very sad.
Right. But the thing is a lot of them are the races of Cain, which are reptilian, comes from the Anunnaki. So I think that there's a lot of, human hybrids, and a lot of them have a lot of dark evil in them because they're more of the hybrid. You know what I mean? The more kind of hybrid and less human. The one that are hybrids that are more human are more compassionate and caring. But there's a story, people want to really get mad at me sometimes. And I'm constantly trying to, I'm always trying to like contact UFO organizations and different people. And I'm constantly emailing, and I've given up now, and trying to communicate with some of these UFO organizations, the Black Vault, the Free Experiencer, and they're always like the same. They're like, oh, can you please take this test? It's like, there's nothing about this test because you only want the information you want that fits into your reality. So I always think like some of these organizations are controlled because they don't want to hear from me. They don't want to know what the actual truth is from a star person's perspective. You know what I mean? That has been awake their whole life. Like, so there's a level of that they have to keep a lid on things so that they can also help, the greater evil stay behind the veil. Because obviously there are beings and extraterrestrials running this planet. And most of our resources are going off world. And they're not, they're not being paid for. And they're raping our world at such a rapid pace because they need these materials for their planets. And, basically we're a stockpile here for biological material and how they've collected our souls, which is a whole other kind of a thing, which they took it off what I call the no thing, or the nothing, right? Which is where we all kind of come from, but it's somewhere else other than the everything, and the everything is where we live right now. So, they've scooped us off of that energy field, the no thing, and then they've, put us in biological suits. That's why a lot of things aren't really clear to us, like exactly who we are and what we are and how we operate, because we used to be part of an infinite. And then we were scooped off and we were separatized and put into a suit and given an identity of I, me, on a slave planet. So there are people that were here like long before any of that started. And those are the indigenous people. So they know a lot more about a lot of things. And I believe that a lot of the indigenous people are protected against what happens to a lot of the rest of us. Not protected into like the physical 3D of, having their family slaughtered or having, and I really believe like them being murdered and slaughtered and everything has a lot to do with what they know the truth. They know the truth that dates back to when this planet was originated, way past the white history, way past, Egypt, way past all this stuff. But the white people, we only want to know what our history is, and a lot of it just goes over to Egypt, like Mesopotamia, where did life start? Well, life didn't start there. We've had the Hopis, and a lot of the ancient elders will tell you, like, we're on the 5th extinction of the planet, and they've survived every other extinction for millions and millions of years. And they've dealt with like all kinds of extraterrestrials. But anyway, so coming back to extraterrestrials, like, I don't really believe, when I'm online and I'm looking at different stories and the things that people are talking about, I don't believe in a lot of the stuff that they're saying. And I think a lot of it is mind control. I think that these kinds of scenarios about their experiences and channeling information with super, galactic beings and stuff, I think is fraud. And I think that and I know for a fact because I've had experiences with the reptoids out of their bodies, and they work, the things that we call shadow figures, demons, that's them operating here in this world. And so they like to talk to people and become the being that person's going to channel, and they'll give them like, out of this world information. They'll, show them things and take them places in order to attach themselves onto the person's body. I worked with a Lakota Sioux medicine woman for a year when I was 23. And that's pretty much all we did was remove beings from people who, got sold into channeling them. And so, like the higher evolved beings, they're not going to sell us anything. They're not going to tell us a story. They don't need us to channel them and project this information into reality. So we have to start thinking, well, who would? Our government, the ETs behind the scene, some of the churches, the Vatican. Think about this, the more that the Vatican comes out against ascension, makes people more interested in believing in ascension. So you have this whole thing, and then you have all these people who were coming out around 2012 that were talking about the shadow planet, just a lot of other things that are being channeled. And the other thing too is that, like I said, higher evolved beings don't need that. A lot of the higher evolved beings, like my star families, they don't even come here. And they don't talk to me about what's going to happen to the world, what, my part in it is. They don't talk to me about any of that stuff. When they talk to me in a way like, how you're doing. And I'm like, it's tough down there. Don't send any more. Do not, because I tell them, like, I am going to be scarred as a spirit no matter where I go, even if they can remove me from this system after I die. I'm never going to be okay from what's happened here. There's never going to be enough, energetic healing that can take place. So they never talk to me in a way like, well, you have a mission. Sometimes, they'll talk to me about how I'm doing, or, my health, or they'll help me with, improving my health, or, different things. But that's it. I mean, they can't really participate in what's going on here. So I look at it this way, my star family is not trying to blow smoke up my shorts about a mission, being a hero, any of this kind of stuff, or what's going to happen. It's a play-by-play blow. We don't know what's going to happen. But if we look at the state of everything, it does not look good. And right now we're headed down, a really, really bad road. And my teacher, Bobado, Rainbow Thunderheart, who passed in June 2016, Shoshone, elder medicine man, he said, this is what's going to happen. We're going to either do this the easy way, but he goes, it doesn't look like we're headed in that direction, or we're going to have to do this the hard way, where, the planet gets involved and flips over, kind of like trying to shake us off its back. Mm-hmm. So we're not headed in a really good direction. And so I always tell people, like, people want to stay at home and they think, oh, the galactics are going to save us and it's going to be okay. And it's like, but there you go again. You're still believing in Jesus Christ. It's just something different. So ascension is the same as, Jesus Christ, the rapture. It's the same, philosophy and idea. But then you have this other one that comes out of other cultures where they call it the harvest. Right. So rapture, ascension, harvest, the great harvest, it's all the same thing. It just depends on what consciousness level you're standing in and what with people who know what kind of truth is going on. And so, I'm okay with harvesting. Extraterrestrials, they're going to get to come in and they're going to take a huge bulk of the population here for biological material, for food, or whatever else, go for it. Because a lot of these people don't deserve to have the right to stay on a planet. I hate to say that, but I mean, that's the fact. I mean, think about how many people can't even just do the basic, which is recycle.
I know. I agree. And I remember, like, for a while, because I do understand the environment, and I was at first and foremost, my first cause was the environment. And I remember people were bringing their bags to the store, and I was just so happy to see that. And no, not anymore. Everyone just gets their plastic bags at the grocery store. It takes you have to be highly conscientious in order to take care of people, to take care of the planet, to do things with integrity. It takes a lot of effort too. And it's just, I don't think people are there yet. Most people just aren't there yet.
No. And so, but now we're at a point where a planet that probably a lot of beings, want, anytime the planet is exploded or a planet is completely damaged and there's no way to re-terraform it, it impacts the whole all. It impacts multidimensionally, and it impacts galactically. You know, it impacts our galaxy, if you want to call it that. And you know, I'll give you kind of a brief story. Paul Stamets, who is like the world authority on mushrooms and even has patents on certain kinds of mushrooms, you know, mushrooms will save this planet. Probably after all the people are gone. But mushrooms will be able to re-terraform everything. And one of the things that he said about it was that they have scientific proof now from outer space that they can see mushroom spores leaving our atmosphere into, you know, the main atmosphere. And he said, you know, in a couple billion years, maybe, you know, the mushroom spores will make it to Mars and they'll be able to re-terraform it into a planet that is livable.
Yeah.
So everything that we do here impacts it. So when we're like stripping off topsoil, even if it's a desert, you know, like this whole Burning Man just really upsets me. When I was a teenager here in Reno, Nevada, we fought for areas of hunting that you couldn't take vehicles in because we hunted, you know, so we wanted to protect the environment, but you couldn't take 4-wheelers or 3-wheelers back then into the environment because some of these canyons out there off the Black Rock Desert where they have Burning Man are like, you know, 5,000 years old. You know, they have plants that are thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, and you can't get this stuff back. And once you damage the environment, you can't get it back. And then what did they do? And so we get this law passed that you can't take ATVs into some of these ancient areas. If you do hunt, you've got to pack everything in and you got to pack it all out on your back, you know,
right,
to make the least amount of footprint to the area. Well, then what they do, they let the Burning Man people come in. You know, now there's like 30,000 people that show up out there. They spend 3 to 5 months. This is the thing. They sell it as green. We're green. They spend 3 to 5 months cleaning up all the oil because all these people make drivable 2-stroke machines that leak oil all over the place, that they carry people around, and then they've got these lights that they, you know, have gas, and, you know, they have all kinds of stuff. And think about, you know, at least 10,000 cars that are showing up and being parked, RVs and motorhomes. There's all that oil and antifreeze and all this other stuff that's going into the ground. Well, they spend 3 to 5 months cleaning up all that. So they literally dig that dirt out of the ground, throw it into a dumpster. So, I mean, probably within the first 2 years, they totally destroyed all of the topsoil out there. And they're like, well, yeah, but it's a desert, you know, like it doesn't really matter. But it matters to the environment around it because parts of the environment around that is ancient. And these are the kind of, you know, you have these people that, you know, think that they're participating in these very conscious experiments like Burning Man. They used to have Dionysus festivals in Roman time. And Dionysus was the demigod. He was born of a human mother and he was the son of Zeus. So he was born as a demigod. And if we go back in history, we can even look through the Sumerian tablets, and they talk about demigods, you know, half probably Anunnaki, half human, you know, or half Nephilim, half human. You know, there's these demigods. These are real stories. They just may have the wrong god attached to it called Zeus. So back in the Roman times, they worshipped a deity named Dionysus, and Dionysus was a shapeshifter, and he could shapeshift into a goat. And this is where Pan comes from. This is where the initial visual experience of what the devil might look like. Pan, who's like a human goat-looking thing, right? So Pan was, you know, a merry old goat and liked to party and do drugs, and there was a lot of art and nudity and sexuality. So, you know, the Catholic Church had to shut that down in order to get the pagans to stop, you know, worshiping and partying for months on end, you know, at the Dionysus festivals, basically. So, you know, here we are 2,000-3,000 years. And this is where we kind of go, okay, there hasn't really been a whole lot of change, right? Because here we are 2,000-3,000 years later, and we've got this thing called Burning Man and some other conscious festivals. I mean, that are probably good. Maybe, you know, some people get something out of it. they, change their thinking, but it hasn't been that whole, because it's the same kind of thing that they were having back in the old days that the pagans were participating in, right? So, 3,000 years. Also, the guy with the economics who just came on. What's one of the first kind of economic things that most people spiritually learn about? And they learn about it in church. That Jesus, which I'm not a big believer in Jesus, Jesus threw over the tables because they were doing commerce in the sacred temple, right? Mm. So he went after the money changers. Well, look at the same people who were the money changers back there are still the money changers now, 2,000 years later.
Mm.
So
well,
really,
let's talk about, okay, I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead. No,
well, in the last 15 minutes, we'll talk about ways to live present in this moment and to live somewhat, to find some kind of peace and healing in these difficult times, in this difficult place, no matter what your beliefs are, just because I do know you come from a healing background and you have that, and with your family being in healing as well. So maybe the last 15, 20 minutes we can focus on that.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so we still have like a little bit here. We can talk, we'll finish talking and move that direction.
So the number one thing I would recommend is people grow food. Whether you can grow food in a windowsill, whether you can, develop part of your yard or your backyard, or say you have a back patio. In a lot of states now, you can keep bees, on your patios. You could, get yourself a little hive of bees. You could grow things and get in touch with nature. So one of the things that I learned early on was that in the everything, we have the creator, right? Which is in some of the indigenous people, they actually call the creator the great computer in the sky, right? So they understand that this is a holographic experience. So the creator established creation, which is the soil, the plants, all the things that live on the earth, so that we could come here and in a vast library of information, learn from creation how to be co-creators. So being a co-creator isn't like you just manifest your house, on the hill, and it's all about you and you have money in the bank. Being a co-creator is, how do I go back and how do I get life force back in the soil? How do I build a relationship with the microbes in the soil, which are the same in my body? So if that soil doesn't have any microbial processes in it, my body doesn't have them, and then I have disease. So how do I build a relationship? How do I learn about making compost even, like maybe make a little compost pile in your backyard, or, inside you can get these really cool things where you can hang them and you can make mushrooms, right next to your kitchen. And so you can take your little mushrooms off and mess around with some culinary experiences and share your mushrooms as they grow, with other people or whatever else. So growing something, having a relationship like the Native people, all my relations, and that you have to build relationships with the things around you. You have to make friends. You have to listen, and you have to listen and work with what they have to teach you. They all have something to teach you. So the second one is meditation. Try to find some type of meditation that you really like. Kelly Howell has a lot of audio stuff. I really like the bilinear, delta beats. I really like that stuff. Like I'll take an hour out of my day, lay on my back, put my headphones on. Lots of free on YouTube. You can find Kelly Howell stuff free on YouTube. You can find all kinds of, talking meditations, binaural beats for your brain waves. There also, I've done traditional Tibetan Buddhism meditation. I've done some Zen. I've done some Sangha, where it's more silent, where you're sitting. Get out and find quiet places that you can sit. Go back to reading books. Create time and space. Maybe make yourself an outside place where you can sit Go to a park. Oh my God. The last few years, because I live in my car, pretty much in and out of my car.
Right.
I spend a lot of time at the older parks where there's beautiful grass and trees, and not many people go to parks anymore. I throw out a blanket, take a snack box, my dog, and we just flop out, nap, watch the clouds go by, look at the trees and the beautiful leaves underneath, get grounded in that grass. And then read and do whatever I'm going to do. I just take a conglomeration of stuff there, and just I'm there just to witness the experience, the clouds, the air, the sounds, the trees, kind of a thing. There's if people have biodynamics in their communities, they have any Rudolf Steiner colleges. There are some phenomenal courses. Our Steiner College is gone here. It's like the most beautiful gem is gone last May, which was in Sacramento. But I know that there's the Pfeiffer College in New York, and there's some other biodynamic Steiner colleges, but they have programs called phenomenology that are just the most amazing year-long courses for changing how you deal with the outside world, right? And it's based a lot on Goethe's work, using whole brain scientific research that you're doing on the outside world, but using like different things like drawing, looking, discovering, taking feathers and how do they float through the air? What does a bird body really look like? Well, it looks like a ship,
Right.
And so then you start to learn, well, then it has a relationship between the air and the water. All birds do, right? Because their bodies are like holes with sails. So just kind of like changing your mind about how things operate, I think, is the best way to start really gaining consciousness. Victor, one of my favorite people, I love to read Rudolf Steiner's work. I think there's one book, it's called How to Reach Higher Kingdoms or Higher Planes of Existence or something like that. You can get them used right off of Amazon. Most brilliant, unbelievable work. Victor Schallenberger, who did lots of scientific work with water and air and all these different things that go against everything that we've been taught in science. So sometimes just immersing yourself in these, searching, for these outside points of view, and then following, that information down the rabbit hole. But ultimately, it always takes time. It's going to take time from us. So, your choices are, do you pay a 30-year mortgage? Or do you get a little cheap place to live where you could maybe have a couple little chickens and you can grow some food and you can read all the books that you want to read? You want to meditate. I mean, those are the choices. I mean, nowadays, because of the way that the healthcare insurance stuff is, I've been in private practice as a traditional osteopath for years and years and years doing, I got attacked by the state, kind of sort of put out of business. I still have people I work on, but, there was just a certain level of what I wanted to participate with and what I didn't want to participate with. So it's been challenging, but it just was a lot easier for me to live out of my car, so that I could actually witness a lot of amazing information that's on this planet, which means that a lot of it has to be read, a lot of it has to be consumed. A lot of it is, I need to go there and see these people and meet these people. You can actually take time out, find an organic farm in your area, email the people. Usually they're pretty busy. You might want to show up and say, hey, can I volunteer 1 day a week? Do you have a CSA? Could I help you pick for that? Could I come out here and shovel? Could I help you with the sheep? Could I help you with your ducks? Could I help you with your turkeys? And maybe commit to like 2 hours a week to go out there and see what's going on. Something different than you have any idea about.
I like that. And I do like volunteering. I think, be a service to your community, be of service to humanity. If you have the extra time, do it.
You'll learn so much. I spent this last winter helping Food Not Bombs in the Reno area, and we fed a certain, 100 homeless on the river under the bridge. That was our section. And so every Monday night we would come together and we'd put out a big buffet, of food we made, food that got donated. Then I really got into it. I started providing clothing and coats and all that other stuff. And because the winters, get pretty cold here. So, sometimes, I find that when people start giving, they start forgiving.
Yes.
But you got to give to forgive, right?
Yeah. Well, staying busy
You're
too,
waiting.
just being active being. So I think just staying busy and in motion. And, I think part of resentment and anger is sitting still. That's just my observation. When people just sit there and they kind of see, you have to have motion and you just need to keep going and you need to participate in something. That's just my
right. But there's these statements, which are rules that govern the energetic field here, like seek and you shall find. So in this paradigm, in order for you to find what you're looking for, you have to go out and seek, because it's one of the established thought processes, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of the established belief systems. Anytime you have a paragraph or something like that, it's usually set. It's established part of a plugin, or a download into the computer system. So, if you want to find something in this 3D world, it means you have to go out and seek if you want to find it. So that's just part of the programming here. I mean, I don't know of any, maybe, maybe people should start making new quotes. The fatter I get and the more I sit in my chair, the more enlightened I become. Start writing that everywhere. And then you could get really fat and stay in your chair and not leave your chair. And you could maybe become super spiritually conscious. But you have to change the program and the rules, right? You have to put a new plug-in into those rules, because seek and you shall find is like in the time where, that came from. People traveled by sandals and donkeys for thousands of miles. So that's more of that statement comes from a place of like, seek and you shall find, which means, get on your feet and travel the distance by foot until you make it where, you're going to set up camp and stay.
Yeah, agreed. So what do you have? Well, probably knowing you, I shouldn't even ask you, what do you have planned for this summer? Well, we're probably taking it day by day.
No, actually.
You have plans, okay.
Well, yeah, so I'm trying to get my van fixed, and so if people want to donate, they can help donate. Consciousness of Economics at gmail.com, PayPal. Help me get my van fixed. No.
We need our van fixed, guys.
I need my van fixed. No. And so then I'm going to be hitting the road, and I'm going to be traveling through Texas and New Mexico. I'm going to be going to work with and see a new friend of mine who grows the native seeds for the 13th Indigenous Grandma and her seed bank. And I'm going to be going to her seed bank. Hopefully I'll be able to meet her and see the seed bank. These are old, ancient seeds. These seeds have been around. And the other cool thing about these seeds is that, the native people have a lot of petroglyphs that show that the ETs came and gave the indigenous people the corn and the beans and these different kinds of plants in order to heal the earth and to keep the vibration going, because they're technology. These seeds are original technology of the program here. So I'm going to be going to do a lot of that. I'm going to be doing some permaculture stuff. I think Janie, my co-host on my show, she's got us signed up for Cobb house building workshop. So we're going to go get barefoot and be like two little 5-year-olds playing in the mud. And then I'm going to meet up with some amazing people who are doing large-scale restoration of land and all over Texas, So I don't know how I'm going to pull it all off. But I was only going to be going for 2 months. Now I'm like, I better just give it 4 months just to see what happens. Because, you start getting into that native time, is what I call it. And you lose time. You know what I mean? So I may get to the seed guy, work with him, help him harvest or whatever else. And then, 3 or 4 weeks later go, oh, I think it's time to move on to the next place. The cool thing about all the people I'm meeting up with, they all get it. You know, they've all worked in the native time. Janie's Cherokee, so she gets native time. So she knows that whenever I get to where she's at, it'll be the right time.
Right.
And then we'll do what we need to do. So I'm actually really excited because this will be the first trip that I've taken. I usually call these vision quests by car. But this will be the first one that I've gone to that's a whole of education. I'm getting to go and see a lot of the stuff that I'm really interested in, that I've also started doing on a small scale. And I get to go and see a lot of this stuff and really actually work hands-on. So I'm really excited about this. And just for the listeners, as soon as, you know, everything clears and eventually I can get land and I can get my combat veterans farm up and going so that they can come and they can learn everything that I will learn and know, and they'll be able to take that back to their communities and, you know, create urban farms or large scale farms and grow food for their communities. Because I think combat veterans, they can't really deal too much with the public. So they need something they can do that's off the public, but they're still involved in their community. They're still making a difference in their community. Plus, they're hard workers, they're organized, they're the perfect new organic, well, I'm going to teach them biodynamics, but they're the new farmers of our future. Inside towns, outside of towns, large scale. And that's going to be my end of my life work, is working with combat veterans and having a full scale old farm that we can serve the community in a super good way. So I'm super excited. So everything that I do now, and people want to help donate to my trips and stuff, this is all education that I'm gathering to do the greater work. And once I have land, I can start getting it all built up, and then we can start routing those combat veterans in, and we can start getting them skilled and tooled and healed. I mean, there's nothing more healing than touching soil, looking at your cow, milking your cow, you know, slowing your life down, getting into like a spiritual mindset that's active, like you were talking about, that you enjoy waking up every morning for, because you know your beautiful, wonderful cows are out there waiting for you. You know, you grab your coffee and you grab your bucket and you go out there and you milk your cows and all the other, you know, dogs and cats that show up for a couple squirts.
That's a cute visual.
And you just kind of live your life as a co-creator, you know, with creation as your teacher and your guiding influence.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. We should also maybe talk about.
Yeah,
go ahead.
My show. Yeah, so my show with Janie Vaught is on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're in Studio A, and you can go to Revelation Radio, and you can go to Studio A schedule and look down, and you'll see us. We're the big bee that's flying towards the flower. And we're on tomorrow. So tomorrow we have an amazing guest named Revolution Radio. We have an amazing guest named Ken Dowse that I came across about a month ago, who is doing legal work because he got involved with it. So tomorrow we have like an amazing guest for 2 hours, and he's going to be talking about mortgage fraud and, you know, the legal language of what they sell us. I mean, it happens in medical too. You know, we have, you know, they, like, I always put this out there, but, you know, for like, if you have a herniated disc or a slip disc, that's what the doctor would call it. If you go to the chiropractor, they call it the subluxation. If you go to a massage therapist, they call it a compression. And this is how they control us, is through language. So every time that you have a different arena, there's always going to be a different language that they use against you to keep you confused. So it happens in the medical arenas, it happens in the legal arenas. And so the more that you know, the less, you know, you'll participate. anyway, so tomorrow we have like an amazing guy named Ken Dowse who's really passionate. We can't wait to hear from him. I know he's going to be way over our head, but we're diving in anyway.
Going in. Going into the wormhole.
Exactly.
And then I know our station, freedomslips.com, and we can always use some donations. How are we doing this month? Anybody know? Mona, do you know?
Last month we were down 2,600, I think.
Oh no! So we really need some donations. Yeah, we got to get back up there. Yeah,
because we're listener supported, and we really need. And we have seeds. We have seeds and seed vaults that you can save. They're going to be like gold in the future, and so that you can grow food. And hey, just after everything we talked about, maybe on your spiritual journey, you get some seeds. You start.
Well, the donations are at 464, and we try to get 2,600 a month. And today is the 6th, so we should have $600 in there, and we can have them. I've started a game on my show. I said, it's time to go to the homepage and click on the ads, because we have like 3 cents every time somebody who comes into chat clicks on an ad. So that's a way to help support the station.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you, Mona.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, you asked me a question. I tried to get there as fast as I could, but hey.
Yeah. Nice. So anyway, we're listener supported. We have, I don't know, how many hosts do we have now?
About
90?
75 or more. I tried to count them, but I got lost.
75. And well, anybody listening, any of the other hosts, you're welcome to come on. I love interviewing other hosts. So
yeah, me too.
Let me know. Send me a Skype message. Message me. whistleblowerheroes@gmail.com is how I can be reached. Whistleblowerheroes, and don't forget the E at gmail.com. And we also have a website, whistleblowerheroes.org. And we're working on getting all the interviews ready and put back up. I still have like a dozen of them to put up, and I've really enjoyed myself and really had an opportunity to speak with some really wonderful people, and hope they've been educational to everybody. And Bridgette, thank you very much. I think we still have another minute, seems like.
Yeah, just about a minute, yeah.
Well, we're done. We're going over the bell.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridgette. Thanks, Mona. You guys have a nice one.
Don't go away yet, girl.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free, but there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart,
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts